Hello and welcome back to As an Aggregator. Today the title is How to Use Playlists as a Discovery Environment. One layer deeper, deep dive. So let me deploy a little bit of culture commentary to dive deeper. Yo, music. We gotta double back to our music playlist, dude. let's get ready to jump into it. Or maybe let's turn the music down and let's get ready to jump into it. Okay, so right now we're looking through playlists, and that means we're looking through titles and thumbnails. So what does it mean to be a content consumer? For me, I've found that being a content consumer means being able to enjoy hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. But how do I get to consuming hundreds of hours of content? Well, it begins at the platform level. It begins at the level. It begins at the level of a title and a thumbnail. And that's where I want to begin right now. Just going through my subscription box and adding videos to our newest ASAP Quick Pick, ASAP 18.2 Quick Pick series. Okay, so let's start scrolling. I got my coffee ready. This might be a little bit faster than I'm anticipating, but otherwise it's good. Wow, a 100% increase. Now, a 100% increase. Bitcoin news just dropped the plan exchange. This year will be insane. Gotta add it to Crypto 5.2. So why am I adding this to Crypto 5.2? Excuse me, Crypto 5a. Because Crypto 5a is my... we were
Epstein going back and
watching Kyle Kalinske.
is Barry Weiss up to at CBS? I think the answer is she is.
Okay, so we're adding videos to playlists right now. And we're trying to figure out what goes next. These are the videos that we have so far. A world built with love, innocence, simplicity, and truth. The poetry of predicament. Bitcoin damage report. Anti-imperialism in the Sahel. Epstein files just changed the world. The Trump-Epstein files situation is so bad. Epstein files exposed. War with Iran. Real Ukraine casualties. Oh no. They got the real casualty numbers? I wonder who's sourcing that. Again, that's what it means to be a content consumer. Always suspicious. Trying to figure out how this information came to be in my hypergraph. Who are these content creators? And what's next? So let's take a look to just double back into the modern investor to see what's going on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to your daily crypto news break. I'm TMI, and I hope that you are all doing well.
Welcome.
For those of you looking to keep your... I myself, they're as well. Affiliate crypto. Welcome back. What other edition of what is going on here? We in the cryptocurrency news space, as I say quite often because it is true, we are quite fortunate in that our news is often quite bright and cheery. It is quite rare that we have any kind of negative news, and if we do, it tends to revolve around prices, or maybe there was some kind of an outflow from an ETF that ended up going back into that ETF the next 24 hours. We have been on a roll, as it were, as of late, constantly receiving news. In case you've missed it, if you did, you're a wizard, because there's really no way you could have missed this. Every company and institution and bank and clearinghouse and you name it at this point has kind of made it a thing, a goal, a topic of discussion regarding the immediate future of the cryptocurrency space. and I mean everything thus far. Last year, we had a handful of cryptocurrency price projections and predictions for 2028, 2032. We had a couple 2033s there as well. But for some reason, this year, everyone seems to be honing on this year and exactly how imaginatively, amazingly, projectedly fantastic it's going to be. We recently heard from Fidelity, we heard from BlackRock, we've heard from every industry leader, every single one, from every single coin, from every single foundation, basically declaring the same thing, that we not only are no longer in the 4-year jigamabob, whatever the thing is called, cycle. There we go. How did I not remember the word cycle? And also that spectacular things are set to happen for the cryptocurrency market this year. So joining the fray is a crypto exchange in Brazil. It says Brazilian crypto exchange. They're called Mercado Bitcoin.
Okay, so that was a hard jump. But what does it mean to jump in like this? To jump into a random channel that you may have no experience with, a random video that you may have no experience with, a random category-specific quick pick. This actually belongs in a derivative, a category-specific derivative quick pick. So how do we go from someone that knows nothing about anything related to the quote-unquote crypto markets to sitting here enjoying culture commentary about
recently
major Bitcoin news?
Published a report highlighting 6 central projections for crypto exchange currency market this year. So joining the fray is a crypto exchange in Brazil. It says Brazilian crypto exchange. They're called Mercado Bitcoin. Recently published a report highlighting 6 central projections for the cryptocurrency markets. The exchange predicted that 2026 will be a significant year in the crypto industry, with expansions in stablecoins, altcoins, and Bitcoin's market capitalization. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you of the constant news that we are hearing, that everyone is predicting at least $250,000 Bitcoin this year. That's why I said, if you haven't been here, welcome. And this is, once again, as we've gone over a multitude of times, the really weird part is that everyone's saying it. So it is going to be a very awkward Christmas 2026 if these people were all wrong. So, fingers and toes crossed, as it were. Mercado Bitcoin, a crypto exchange platform in Latin America, has published a report outlining potential growth trends in the crypto ecosystem. The report highlighted 6 major trends that are expected to shape the cryptocurrency market this year. According to the report, Bitcoin is primarily viewed as a store of value, similar to gold. However, the digital asset has more advantages compared to gold, which faces logistical challenges and storage hurdles. The report identified a growing trend among institutions that now view Bitcoin as a better store of value compared to gold, due to its characteristics as a borderless and self-custodial.
Okay, so while I was listening to the modern investor talk, I remembered that I had to go back to OTLD. Oh goodness, yeah, we're actually on day number 2 of the World Economic Forum. So I have to double back to day 2. Not day 1, we just wrapped day 1. And we're still taking a look at the UK government published a global biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and national security assessment. Nate Higgins told us about this one. So this is what the highest level of a UK national security assessment that's been published officially to the public. This is on planetary boundaries. Okay, let's go back to YouTube. Okay, and we're gonna go to history because we maintain a synthetic watch history playlist, so we're gonna want to make sure that that's up to date. I've been listening to William Catton. Okay, so where are we at with this? So why am I stalling? Because I'm checking on my I'm thumbing to my post pause watch history. If you don't know what that is, it looks like this. It includes everything that I was willing to put into a playlist as a reflection of my subscription, as a reflection of my watch history playlist. So most recently we have the Epstein Files, just changed the world forever. I'm not an environmentalist or a writer. Okay, so now I'm adding videos to this playlist. Trying to get a sense of the closest point of attribution. I'm going to add this to post pause watch. Included interview with William Catton Jr. Okay, so we're good. I guess if we finish this, we can put it in our post-pause watch
Asset.
history as well.
Bitcoin ETFs in the US alone have 116 billion US dollars in net assets under management. Data from something called So Value, an ETF tracking website, shows that apparently XRP ETFs have $1.47 billion in assets under management, which is equivalent to around 1% of their market cap. The data shows that these funds have witnessed consistent inflows since the 14th of November and have only witnessed negative flows on the 7th of January. And then it kind of goes into more things about market caps and where things are going to go. And the projections, if you're not looking at the screen, sure, it says XRP and Solana ETFs will account for 80% of inflows into altcoin ETFs. I'm going to logically assume that that would mean, what do you call it? That another 20% would just be Ether? Shrug. I kind of assumed it would be 80% Ether, and then other coins would kind of follow after. Here's the actual PDF for their things that they believe are going to happen in 2026. There's a bit of a heavy, if you like look through it, heavy leaning on Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Solana from the point of where they think the market is going to. And I mean, that's, if we can all be completely honest with ourselves, this seems to be some of the most logical ideas that I've heard in quite some time. But also, don't forget that this year is also going to be the year of winners, as I refer to it, because we are going to see by the end of the year, A, if all of this ended up happening, and B, which coins have been absorbed by these companies and corporations and governments. But yes, it is a fascinating time to be in the cryptocurrency market, not only for the constant good news, but also just to continuously hear. This is, I mean, I think we had one other crypto exchange who announced that they were, what do you call it, kind of bullish on the crypto market. Crypto exchanges tend not to get involved in this kind of price prediction thing. We did recently hear from Changpeng Zhao, the founder of Binance. He said something about, like, tons of banks are buying up crypto. I hope everyone's prepared. And if someone says something like that, we can only assume that you mean, are we prepared for higher prices and good things to happen? But this is a very long, I have no idea how many pages. It's still kind of going. Hold on. It says it on the side. I know it's cut off because of the this little area over here, but I think this is at least, okay, 48 pages of them talking about it. So yeah, it's, once again, it's nice to always get good news. It's just, I would actually, really love if we did get these incredible prices over the course of this year. Everyone kind of really like honed in just on 2026. Historically, we always hear like a 5-year thing. It's always the same. In 2017, you hear about 2022. In 2022, you hear about 2027, like that kind of thing. For some reason, everyone is honed in on 2026 as being the year that we have additional trillions of dollars moving into the market. So yes, Mercado Bitcoin, is it called that? Sure. It has also jumped into the ring along with 27 other individuals, all discussing how amazing prices are going to be. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Also sure, why not, I guess. Last year, there was a really weird, and I don't know where this came from, there was a really weird thing where tons of like crypto, no, where a bunch of real estate companies began to pop up out of nowhere to seemingly announce their conviction not only for crypto, but also for Bitcoin. We love it. It's fantastic. It's amazing. We are going to be buying tons of crypto. There was one, I don't know, there were multiple within the United States, but the one that sticks out to me was the one from Mexico. This was around summertime. It was quite interesting. They said that they had billions of dollars in real estate, this one company. However, I think that they announced that they had purchased, I think $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, and that they were planning on selling $1 billion worth of homes to buy more Bitcoin as well. There was tons of real estate companies announcing the exact same thing. They were lightly pivoting, or they believed in crypto more. There was the thing from the guy from BlackRock talking about Bitcoin's market cap being higher than real estate within the United States. You name it. So back in the news again, Cardone Capital is apparently deepening its bet on Bitcoin, with its founder, Grant Cardone, announcing that the firm will add another $10 million in Bitcoin as part of its expanding hybrid real estate crypto investment model. Now, some of you might sit there and go, why the fudge would they do that? Well, one of the general ideas about the future, and I mean any time from right now until the year 9000, is that Bitcoin will be able to be staked. So this was also a late in year conversation that we had when I was telling you that I have a number of friends who are also into real estate, and they've lightly foregone the idea of buying more real estate to just simply invest in crypto, and namely cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin included, that you can stake and make passive income from. The general idea being, with Bitcoin, you don't have to find a tenant, you don't have to hope that they pay the rent, you don't have to see if they've scratched the walls or have disappeared, what have you. So you just be able to buy the Bitcoin, stake it, put it into a crypto exchange, and make money from it in this way, not even thinking about or talking about the predicted growth for Bitcoin price-wise, etc., etc. The move follows a series of sizable Bitcoin purchases throughout 2025, and is part of the company's view that commercial real estate cash flow can serve as a long-term engine for Bitcoin accumulation. In a post on Twitter, Cardone said that the company remains committed to holding best-in-class institutional real estate and Bitcoin for the long haul. And here's a little tweet for it right here. We are long-term holders of both institutional best-in-class real estate and Bitcoin. This is quite a common trend. There were other companies, but I think they only popped up once or twice. Grant Cardone, I want to say like every 7 weeks, there was something Cardone and real estate and Bitcoin in the news, so I guess he's just kind of back again. It's really interesting because years ago, these were spectacular numbers. Don't let me be misunderstood with the idea of $10 million not being spectacular. It's an egregiously large amount of money. But for some reason last year, we had so many companies buying $430 million, $880 million, that whenever news like this would pop up, it was kind of like brushed away by many people within the space. It's kind of like if you didn't know, a couple of weeks ago, I think Texas bought like $5 million worth of Bitcoin. It didn't make it into the news because it wasn't hundreds of millions of dollars. So yeah, these companies and institutions are still gathering and loading up on as much crypto as they possibly can, while seemingly retail investors continue to walk away from the space. But and not to sound ominously Dr. Evil, they will come back, and that's always the case. It's only when they can't afford the market anymore and things have gone a lot higher that they'll rush back in and kind of realize that they should have stayed. But that's just how cycles thus far have been. Also, tying very, very, very closely to that news is another company who, geez Louise, last year was a mess. Last year, a company called Stake and Shake announced that they were thinking about getting into crypto. And they posted on the twits, they were like, hey, should we get into Bitcoin or Ether? I think they only had 2 coins. And Bitcoin won by a wide margin on their thing. And then they started accepting Bitcoin as a company, which is a very clever way to accumulate Bitcoin from other people. I give you hamburger, you give me wealth, like that kind of thing. And then they announced on Twitter that they were thinking of also accepting Ether and stuff as well. And if you weren't here, it was dramatically unnecessary. People on Twitter were like adding them, and they were like, I am never eating at your establishment again. Me and my family will never go there because we've been talking about Ethereum. And I was like, Mary, do you think your $17.25 is going to, like, oh gosh, this one person isn't going to our burger place, I assume it's burgers, anymore? And yeah, people actually like terrified the company. And they were like, okay, fine. We're only going to accept Bitcoin. And I was like, okie dokie, sure, that's how logic works. So they're back in the news. The American fast food chain, Steak and Shake, has apparently made also a $10 million Bitcoin purchase for its strategic reserve to deepen the integration of the cryptocurrency into their business. Steak and Shake made the announcement on Saturday through the company's Twitter account 8 months after it began accepting Bitcoin payments in its U.S. restaurants. The rollout began in May after weeks of teasers, and the company says it has seen improvements in some store sales thanks to the Bitcoin initiative. Are people using their crypto? I ask as a real question, just because I can't imagine that most people would. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, and please, by all means, if you need a shake or some new shoes, go for it. But yeah, that was a real question. But apparently people are. We heard about that before, which I thought was quite interesting. Who was this? There was someone in the crypto space a couple of years ago, and he was discussing the actual usage of Bitcoin, and he was like, no, I use Bitcoin every day. Like, I use it to do this, and I use it to fill up my car, and I was like, what? That was also, Bitcoin's price was a lot lower, so I just usually assume that no one wants to be the pizza guy. That's just generally an assumption. So yeah, cool. Another company has purchased $10 million worth of Bitcoin. So a real estate company and a fast food chain. I'm surprised we haven't heard from Metaplanet in the last couple of days. They're supposed to be accumulating, what was it, 180,000 Bitcoin in the next 11 months. So I assume they'll also be popping up into the news as well with a large news purchase. Okie dokie. Let's move on. Also, in major news, it's not really major news, it's kind of copycat news because they have no choice but to do something like this. So, in case you somehow missed my words in English, companies are desperate to get into the cryptocurrency space. Many of them have taken just about a decade, oddly enough, about a decade to actually get into the market. There was this really weird mysticism around crypto for some time, and these companies and institutions kept on announcing they didn't care for crypto, Bitcoin is garbage, why should I do that? Oh, these little types of things. And now it appears that everyone is desperately trying to get into the market. So, every company right now, every institution, is trying to make their own crypto exchange in some form or fashion. A lot of them will fail because we already have highly established ones. A lot of them are trying to make yield products. Yeah, a lot of these institutions are trying to do stuff regarding Bitcoin, saying that their clients want them, yada yada. A lot of them are announcing tokenization. Yeah, so basically the further digitization, if you will, of assets on chain. And as we've been hearing, the majority of them, as far as we have heard, are going to be on Ethereum, are going to be on Solana, and going to be on the XRP ledger. This is the news that we've heard. I'm sure there are other chains and other things that will happen, but as of late, this is what we have gathered. So, 2 years ago, the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ were actually in discussion to begin to have basically, or be open 24 hours a day. Why, you might ask? Because they're currently, and it's not 9 to 5, but they have very set hours that stock exchanges around the world are actually open. The issue ends up being is that also cryptocurrency gained a huge amount of popularity, not only because, we're quite used to being able to buy fractionalized stocks. You can do these on many different platforms. You can buy half of a stock, what have you. That wasn't really a thing even a decade ago. So crypto became popularer because you were able to buy fractions of a coin. You could buy 0.00001 Bitcoin if you wanted to. Once stock exchanges closed, especially years ago, you would actually see the trading volume on Coinbase begin to shoot up. People were looking for a place to move their money and do stuff and make money, after hours, especially when New York City is sleeping. The other side of the world is wide awake. So you telling these people, hey, you can trade futures, but the market won't actually move. Well, guess what?
So we're listening to The Modern Investor. This is a bit of culture commentary from 2 days ago, specifically talking about the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency markets, published on February the 1st, 2026.
That's what does move, crypto. 24 hours a day. So now it seems that those discussions have moved a lot quicker because this is supposed to be the year when the cryptocurrency space expands and the crypto market gets a lot bigger and trillions of dollars are meant to enter our market, and everyone, of course, wants to join and have fun as well. According to an announcement published on Monday, the New York Stock Exchange, part of the Intercontinental Exchange, is developing a digital platform designed to support trading and on-chain settlement of tokenized securities subject to regulatory approval. The first iteration for a lot of these things is going to be the digitization of stocks and bonds and treasuries. So this is what we've heard thus far. Apparently, it's the easiest method. Robinhood is also doing so. Coinbase also, I believe. Coinbase for the US market. I believe their tokenized stock thing is already running. I think Kraken also has one as well. I'm not really sure, but I think I remember seeing the words kind of together. The secondary part that we've been hearing after companies and institutions and yada yada get used to this and they all have their own kind of platform will then be real estate. And then the digitized real estate after that is meant to be, I forgot what it was, but it's some other thing that normally isn't traded in stock exchanges and yada yada. Everybody wants to be open 24 hours a day. Everyone wants, because they realize now, when you do things on chain, everything is a transaction, obviously. But now you can charge for those transactions in real time, instantaneously. So it's a huge difference for stock exchanges to be open at a certain time, as opposed to them being open 24 hours a day. Got it. It's one thing for a contract to go through for some piece of property that has been securitized by the SEC, what have you. It's also another difference if that is fractionalized 10,000 times, and you have 10,000 transactions constantly going through these chains. The proposed platform would allow round-the-clock trading of U.S.-listed equities and exchange-traded funds, fractional share access, and near-instant settlement through tokenized capital, rather than traditional multi-day clearing cycles. In short, Wall Street wants fewer waiting periods and more immediacy. You get a lot more money this way. The big thing that people usually don't talk about has to do with the actual fractionalization of things. It is usually touted as a way that normal people can get into the market more. You want to buy a house? You buy a fraction of it. It's $27. But these transactions add up really fast. This is why we're seeing this rush. If you've heard it before, I believe the number is $1 trillion. $1 trillion so far that has been tokenized or is digitized in some sort of way on chain, blah, 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 blah. The real money is supposed to come, as we've been hearing, by 2030. $100 trillion will be tokenized, of assets will be tokenized across multiple chains and multiple platforms with settlement, as far as we've been hearing, on public chains like Ethereum. This is why you saw those companies last year talk about they were buying up so much ether, because there's not a lot left. There's always some being burned, and you get it. At the technical level, the platform pairs the New York Stock Exchange's pillar matching engine with blockchain-based post-trade infrastructure, supporting multiple chains for settlement and custody. That's what I was also saying. We need to hear which chains. We have heard a lot of speculation from these companies and from the Novogratses within this market that we are, everything's moving to Ether. We know that all these platforms are launching, getting started by summertime. I would assume a good portion of them have already launched. We need the news that the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, Amazon, this bank, that so-and-so is using this chain. They're using that chain. That will be the big moment for like money movement and prices going a lot higher. Because everyone's talking about digitizing and doing stuff on chain and multiple chains, but which ones? Orders could be sized in dollar terms and funded using stablecoins, adding flexibility without distorting familiar market mechanics. And then the article basically goes on to talk about how amazing and awesome and fantastic this is going to be. Cool. Yeah, interesting times ahead for the cryptocurrency market. I still await to see how awesome this is all going to be for us. Because also, as I stated earlier, we're quite lucky in crypto that our news is typically like this all the time. We are always, and it used to be a lot of Ethereum's getting an upgrade. This is going to happen to this chain. This is going to so-and-so. This company is now using that chain, or they've partnered with them, that kind of thing. But we've gotten into like big boy territory with the New York Stock Exchange is talking about digitizing and tokenizing hundreds of millions of billions of dollars worth of assets. But on which chains is the question. I mean, we have a fair idea as to which ones it could be, but I need words. I need proof as to which ones. That will also greatly affect the investing methods of a lot of people when we know exactly which like 5 chains have kind of cornered the market. Yeah. Okie dokie, everyone. I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all remembering to drink water. Hope you're all having a great day, a great morning, a great afternoon, a great evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope that is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.
Any luck on finding Okay, so we're jumping back into playlists for Q1 2026. We're on February already. I know, February. Let's see what video is next for us to watch. Deindustrialization of the West. Woke.net. ICE raid protests nationwide. If this wasn't dubbed, then or subbed, and if it was dubbed, then I would include it. Most people offline in 2026. Yeah, that's what I'm feeling from people. Okay, huge. The DGQC.
has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction.
Streamed live on January the 31st. So we're gonna put this into ASAP 18.1 since it's a little bit of the overlap. The house always wins on Jekyll Island. Let's check out Macroaggression, see what he has going on.
It's all about the macro productions.
And they are a stain on humanity. This was Woodrow business plan. If you run a small business, if you carry 98%. And I mean, George H.W. Bush, for my money, was the worst human being who was president. But some of the decisions that Woodrow Wilson made slit the throat of the American people, essentially. And so we want to talk about that. We're going to talk about the money trust. This is a group of bankers that were behind the formation of the Federal Reserve. We're going to talk a little bit more about, and we'll wrap up with banker wars. We'll talk about how these bankers wind up being the most dangerous tentacle. When I wrote The Octopus of Global Control, of the 8 tentacles that we've got there, I mean, I think it's tempting to say that the military is the most dangerous. And of course, in some regards, it is, because they're the ones that are doing the fighting. But the wars don't kick off at all.
Okay, so mind you, this channel as an aggregator is a content marketing operation designed around communicating what I am consuming in terms of actual videos that are represented by titles and thumbnails. So when it comes to the creature from Jekyll Island, that's an interesting bit of supposition in terms of early formation technique of how the Federal Reserve was constructed. I do find it to be credible. Same thing with there's a book on the Bank of International Settlements, which is a wild tale. Shout out to literature. But we're giving this as a preface because I'm not really as right-wing as this guy is, but we still consume this type of content
about the banks. And so
because we get interesting perspectives outside of our consumed digest. And that's really what we offer as a content curator, is to get you out of your consumed digest and into different places where you may not have ever thought about consuming this or that, but you find it to be useful and valuable.
Well, I think the banking tentacle is the most dangerous, in my opinion. The use of money, the access to money, and the lack of access to it really sets the tone for how your country is going to run. And the central banks have infiltrated just about every country on Earth, and they are a stain on humanity. I've had people ask me, obviously it's a hypothetical, if you could become president. Not that I would ever want that job, but should you become president, what would be the first thing that you would do? Or what would be the one thing that you would do that would have the biggest impact? I would take every single person who works at the Federal Reserve, march them out into the courtyard, after fair trial, of course, and have them executed for their crimes against humanity. The bankers are the most dangerous people on the planet. You're going to understand when we get done with this episode what they did to America, set this country back a century. I mean, from the time that the Federal Reserve was instituted, the clock started ticking on the value of our money, and it has been whittled away by 98% in over a century. But I think those days are coming to an end. I hope they are. I want to talk about a guy he doesn't get the credit he deserves for destroying the United States from within, and you probably have never even heard his name, but I'm talking about Colonel Edward Mandelhouse. This is not a name that gets thrown around a lot, and that actually should be your first indicator that he's pretty important, because he was a deep operator in banking, politics, and international affairs. He was born in 1858. He died in 1938 at the age of 79, 1 year before World War II. Don't worry, that way he would have loved World War II. He was deeply involved in the creation of World War I through the banking component of this. So he's Woodrow Wilson's right-hand man, and I think it's fair to say his handler. He never held a political office. He was so close with Woodrow Wilson, in fact, that Colonel Mandelhouse lived in the White House, and which is a weird thing to do, especially when you have no declared role, no official role in the government. He was not his chief of staff. He wasn't. I mean, he's a handler, and he was there. Well, look, let's be honest. He was in the White House, and the reason why Mandelhouse was there was because Woodrow Wilson was there, and the only reason why Woodrow Wilson was in the White House was because of Mandelhouse. So he got him elected, and part of the package deal is that, whether this was Woodrow Wilson's idea, whether he was amenable to this or not, this guy was sent in there to keep control of him. Woodrow Wilson had one job and one job only. That was to get in there and start the Federal Reserve. Okay, and once you do that, it starts the process of where we are today. I'd say if he had a secondary job, it would be once you get the Federal Reserve up and running, then we immediately need to start a world war. And of course, Woodrow Wilson was the president who got America into World War I. So he was sent there. Essentially to make sure that their plan was put into place in 1913, which of course it was. So who had the plan? Who was behind all of this? Well, there's a group called the Money Trust, and we've talked about them before. It's a group of bankers, and for the last 20 years of the 1800s.
The Money Trust! So this is going to take a little bit of due diligence, just because anybody can say anything until we start running down the sources. So the power of this is that I try to cultivate content creators that do a little bit of the legwork for us so that we don't have to run it down, but we still have to run it down. Does that make sense? So who is the Money Trust, and what is the Money Trust? We would open up another piece of another tab, and we would run it down.
And for the first, let's say, 40 years of the 1913, which of course it was. So who had the plan? Who was behind all of this? Well, there's a group called the Money Trust, and we've talked about them before. It's a group of bankers, and for the last 20 years of the 1800s, and for the first, let's say, 40 years of the 1900s, the group running finance in the United States was the Money Trust, and they're a New York City-based banking cabal. They ran the Pilgrim Society, which started in 1902. Big, group of these guys, WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. It's sort of like northeastern banking elite, and they were Money Trust was involved in Skull and Bones at Yale. It's that group. These are the white devils. These are the real white devils. Not the imaginary one that the left's always fantasizing about. But these people were diabolical. Okay. And they were. The group is comprised of Edward Mandelhouse as one of them. J.P. Morgan was part of this group. Jacob Schiff, William Rockefeller, Felix and Paul Warburg and Nelson Aldrich. And what they did is that, bankers always love to create these boom and bust cycles. They make a lot of money during them. So when you know that you've got the game rigged, and then you control the media, you can make it seem like there's a big catastrophe coming, so that the general public either all sells their stock or all buys their stock or whatever they do. But this is a head fake, of course, because the people who are behind this create the bankers. They create the panics, and then they profit from them. And this was what happened in 1907. It was called the 1907 Panic, where they had advance notice of a banking catastrophe that was coming because they created it. And what happened is that in the aftermath of this, they did what always happens: is they shake out all the weak hands and they consolidate power into a tighter group of people. So it bankrupted rivals, those that weren't part of the money trust. They weren't privy to the game that was being played, the scam that was being set up, and so it caught a lot of them off guard. It's like playing a rigged game of poker. You don't know if everyone at the table's cheating, and you're the guy who isn't cheating. You don't know that you're walking into a trap here. And these guys they're diabolical, of course. And they set this up, this rigged game. And in 1907, they did kind of like what Rothschilds did with the Napoleonic Wars too. Like they leak information that it's going one way. The general public acts like a herd and all dumps their stock or whatever, and then they come in, buy it up for pennies on the dollar, and then, what do you know? Napoleon actually won, and boom, there goes the or Napoleon lost, or whatever. So they sell the stories to the general public one way, and then they're betting on the other side. I mean, this is just like, it's like rigging a basketball game if you're the mafia. You know what I mean? It's like all of a sudden, you got information that that your star player knocked up his girlfriend, right? And his head's not going to be in the game, and so you bet the other way. So this has been going on for a long, long time. There's nothing really new to this. But what this group did, this group, the Money Trust, they got together and decided that they would formulate a plan to really officially take control of the American finance industry. Case can be made that they had control of it beforehand, but not in the way that they did in the aftermath of it. So they decided to take a secret trip to a small island off the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island. And that, of course, is where you get the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. So this banking cabal goes to Georgia, and the criminals from the Money Trust went on a very secret mission. So secret that they all left individually on these trains and left from like different stations so that nobody would... I mean, I just imagine that if you're a high-level banker like this, that the media is watching you, right? That they're trying to figure out, or your rivals are watching you as well. And if they see you meeting with a certain person, maybe they make some sort of inferences that, maybe you guys are doing a deal together, we need to get... So it behooves these guys to not talk about what they're doing and to not, I mean, these days it'd be like, don't all get on the same private jet and go to Epstein, right? You go single file, right? You go separately, and you kind of hide your tracks a little bit. And so that's what they did. When they got to Jekyll Island, they were only referred to by their first name. Obviously, the last name of some of these people were going to set off, red flags with help. I mean, you either keep it real quiet or you have to kill all the maids after you're done with the meeting. And not that they wouldn't do that, but they didn't in this particular case. So what they wanted to do was plot on how to privatize the U.S. money system for their own benefit and for their control. And so what they did is 6 members took the trip, late-night trains, super secret, and got to Georgia and stayed there for about a week on this island, out of the out of the glare of the New York City media, where they're either coming from, most of them were coming from New York, some of them were coming from Washington, D.C. But you can't have the press talking about this secret meeting that you're having. So they slipped off, got together, had the meeting, and then did the same thing on their way back. So who was there at the meeting? The names, you might recognize some of them, but most part, these names aren't exactly common knowledge these days. Paul Warburg was there. You probably know who he is. He was a German banker, brother of Max Warburg. This guy was a partner of Kuhn, Loeb and Company, which is a bank. He was the head of the German intelligence agency, and he was sent there really at the behest of the Rothschilds. He was representing his brothers, he was representing his family, the Warburg family, but also the Rothschilds. He was their person for that. You've got Nelson Aldrich, who was there. He's a leader of the Republican Party in the Senate. He was a Republican from Rhode Island. He was a member of the Pilgrim Society. All these guys are members of the Pilgrim Society, by the way. So he was their politician that they had in their pocket, and he needed to come down there so that they could explain to him what the game was, and so that when he goes back, he's obviously not going to mention that he just had a really in-depth, week-long meeting with the most powerful bankers in the world, and he's going to keep that to himself. But they're going to need to sell him on the not sell him on the idea, but they're going to have to explain to him how he's going to sell Congress on the idea of this, and it's going to be a tough one. But they had a plan, and he was part of their plan. Henry Davidson is on this list. He represented J.P. Morgan, Bankers Trust, Astor Place Bank, and the Red Cross. So he's a guy who most people don't know the name, but he was representing the Morgans in this relationship. It's another thing. It's kind of hard to have, like, you can't have Mr. Rockefeller and Mr. Rothschild and Mr. Morgan all leaving at the same time and winding up at this place. So what they did, they set their trusted representatives who were going to work out the details for them for the banks that they controlled. Charles Norton is on the list. He was from the Taft administration. He was a banker, of course, president of First National Bank, New York City. He was a president of the Merchants Club. And so he was a guy that was a New York banker who most people at that time had an idea. This is 1910, by the way, when they're doing this. So we're talking about 115 years ago, long time ago. But one thing that didn't change is that banks still run the world. Frank Vanderlip was on the list. He's the president of National City Bank, otherwise known as Citibank. He's a New Yorker, partner of William Rockefeller. He was sent there as the Rockefeller representative to make sure that their interests were upheld here. And lastly on the list was a guy named Benjamin Strong. He was the head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust. He was a member of the Money Trust. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a member of Bohemian Grove. I mean, I think they all fit that category of guys who look like they'd be partying at Bohemian Grove, and this is no exception here. So these guys used the week plus, I think it was about 10 days all in terms of travel and while they were there, to explain to Nelson Aldrich what he was going to tell Congress, or how he was going to sell it, and most importantly, how he was going to sell it without mentioning that they had all talked. Because if the word got out that he was hanging out with bankers, then they would know you can't be the representative of us, because I mean, it's clearly you're not talking for yourself. It looks like you're speaking on behalf of these bankers. Not to say that the rest of Congress wasn't also compromised by bankers as well, but I think they knew about his relationship with the money trust, and so people were a bit skeptical anyway. So. This was the meeting that they had where they got it all worked out. By the time they left, they felt pretty comfortable. They felt like we'll have Aldrich take this to Congress and we'll just get it passed. It'll be no big deal. What wound up happening though, actually, is that it didn't. There was pushback on it almost immediately from this. There were a lot of people were saying, no, we don't need this. We don't like this. This is not going to work. The Aldrich plan was what it was called. The Aldrich plan had a lot of people that were pushing back against it, and rightly so, of course. But I'm always a bit surprised to see that anybody pushed back against it. I sort of assumed that the bankers owned all of them. I don't know why there'd be some that sort of weren't under their control, but this was it. This was the concept of a private central bank that their partners, created by the money trust and benefiting them, and certainly not in any way, shape, or form helping out the American people. What they wanted to do, it's an audacious plan, and one that eventually wound up working, is that it's like, let us be in charge of the money system, and what we'll do is we'll print the money, we'll create the money, and then we'll loan it to the Treasury, the United States Treasury, and then you borrow from us, and then you pay us interest. Now, the logical question is, aren't we the Treasury? What do we need you for? Can't we just do this? Can't we just print this up? And they said, yeah, but we're bankers. I mean, you don't want to get into all the banking stuff, right? All the nitty gritty of that. And they're like, well, we're the fucking Treasury. I mean, if anyone's qualified, it would be us. Well, that's logic, okay? And that's sanity to think that a private bank does not need to insert itself in the middle of this government when the government can simply print the money itself and create it and not have to borrow it. So it just goes to show you how deeply controlled these people are, that the most logical and simple concept, which is let's just have the Treasury do this and not pay the interest on the debt, that was not even really, that was an idea that they painted as preposterous somehow. And eventually they got their way in 1913. So yeah, when they introduced this in 1910, bankers loved it, but many of the politicians didn't, including, actually, treasonous scumbag Woodrow Wilson. He came out against it publicly. Keyword is publicly. Publicly came out against it. But there's a lot of people that we see in today's Congress who come out publicly against something only to privately be supporting it and are used as controlled opposition. And Woodrow Wilson was one of those guys. He wound up passing this in 1913, thus sealing the fate of America for the bankers. I want to, as I mentioned, Vandelhouse was his handler. And there's letters that he sent to Wilson back and forth that wound up in, I guess, Woodrow Wilson's, I want to say his diary or some of his records. And they're so bananas that I've got to read them word for word, because you're never going to, you're just never going to believe it if I don't read it word for word. So this was okay. So it's long, but hang in there with me. So he says, so somewhere between 1913 and 1921, Colonel Mandelhouse wrote these comments in his journal. He said, the president. Okay, so this is Mandelhouse's journal. The president is to perpetuate the slavery of Americans. By design, we have been kept bankrupt and insolvent by an ancient evil system of pledging. Central bankers have been profiting at our expense for over 70 years. This is one of the comments he put. So he said, very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property, meaning your children, in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel, meaning property, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading, meaning birth certificate, to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designated to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser for not one.
Okay, so I'm framing it like that because I'm like, jeez, it gets into the weeds of like, what do you really want to have included as a reflection of culture commentary? For me, it's like, I always love a good Jekyll Island discussion when it comes to talking about central banking. And we might do a walkthrough or a read-through, because this book is on YouTube, so we might just have somebody play it out It's hard for me to get into the weeds, especially because macroaggressions is right wing a little bit. It's right leaning. Excuse me, I should not say right wing. It's right leaning. And so it can get a little bit problematic in how they decide to elucidate certain concepts. But let's continue.
Man in a million could ever figure our plans. If by accident one or two should figure out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debts to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance, aka Social Security. Without realizing it, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the highest office, meaning the presidency, of our dummy corporation, United States, to foment this plot against America. That is Colonel Edward Mandelhouse, okay? So they are talking about using birth certificates as ownership of, and they're talking about the United States as a corporation, not the United States of America like the country, but the corporation of the United States. The birth certificate, that's why your birth certificate is written in all capital letters, because you are a corporation. It's corporate, more or less. And I'm unqualified, and I'm not going to be able to go into the depths of this because it's too technical, and I couldn't do it right anyway. So there's a lot more to this story than just that. But if you think about it, the idea that they create the banking system. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act passes, and it's H.R. 7873, Federal Reserve Act, signed by Woodrow Wilson, created a de facto central bank owned in part by foreign interests, meaning like the Rothschilds and Warburgs, plus the WASP, banking royalty like Rockefellers and Morgans. And what they've done is they privately own the bank and can issue banknotes at their discretion. This was something called the National Reserve Association, later became the Federal Reserve Act. And they launched the Federal Reserve private bank that can loan money to the Treasury at interest, which they collect, which is the national debt that everybody talks about, how it's so out of control. And then simultaneously, they created the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, as the collection arm of this. So what they said was, we'll create this funny money by the Federal Reserve. We'll loan it into existence. We'll charge interest on it. And then the government, you're going to owe us the money. And the government says, well, we don't want to owe you the money. What we'll do is we'll make the people owe you the money. So what we'll do is we'll start the process of taxation. We'll start taxing them for it. Start small at first, right? It's always like, we're only going to tax the millionaires. And everyone goes, yay, good, tax those millionaires. And then it's like, well, now we're going to...
Okay, I'm getting bored of this. Okay, if you want to check it out, The House Always Wins on Jekyll Island. We put it into a new playlist. Okay, so we're continuing. Molt book. We just entered the singularity. Scrolling. Was Elon Musk rejected by Epstein? Lessons in meme culture. 3 most popular markets in Da Nang, Kanhan, Suntrai. Interesting. We'll get to that at some point. Okay, we're scrolling. Activision just copyright struck Battlefield 6 for stealing its Call of Duty assets. Risk instruments for hedging. Yes, dude, yes. We have to include that.
Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri. Today we're going to cover risk hedging instruments as part of our risk management series here. This video is intended just to be a nice, soft, easy introduction here to some of the most common products. So we're going to cover the history of these sorts of products here and show you little variations and exotic option kind of pieces to these as well. And then we're going to cover futures and forwards as a general class, options, and then finally we're going to go over the swaps. So when I was studying for my FRM, the Financial Risk Management designation, there's a chart in the book in the 2015 Financial Risk Manager FRM exam, part 1, Foundations of Risk Management. It's figure 2.1 in the book. That chart is from FRM and has been updated, but it was originally from The Economist from April 10th of 1993. I just really like the layout and the design, and you can see like the different sorts of options here. So if you look on the screen, just to kind of zoom into parts of these, you'll see like the first one here I have is foreign currency futures of 1972, and then you see it actually rapidly develops over time. So these are a type of futures, which we're going to talk about. And then we see equity futures, another type of futures, equity options, T-bill futures, T-bond futures, and then we get into like, futures of mortgage-backed bonds, OTC currency options, currency swaps, bank CD futures, and you can kind of look at this chart and see as we go from 1972 through 2012, there are a lot of advancements, things like ETFs being brought onto the scenes, the VIX being created, which is the volatility index here, and you'll see there's just a lot of kind of unique pieces that are put into play on this. Now, keep in mind, some of these like CLOs and CDOs and things were contributing to some of the financial crisis that we've seen here, and so this is really just...
it's my type of content, but it's not really streamable. It's not really streamable. But we're gonna throw this into financialization. So that's pretty legit. It's legit. Okay, so what's next? An analysis, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Oh, Grassland, full season 6 compilation, the Ants Canada Ecosystem Vivarium series. Grasslands, full season 6. Okay, legit. Actually, throw it in Naturalist Roots too. Throw it in Naturalist Roots too. Oops. Will Europe ally with China? I'm not really interested in that at the moment. Agent Swarms, OpenAI virus, and the age of parabolic volatility. I am, in fact, looking forward to this. This is what we could watch.
Maybe they're just getting on token usage, but very wary. All right, we're finishing off the month. Everything's pretty much up across the board. So despite all the volatility that's been going on, still finishing up with the first 5 days of the year up and the month up. I think it's like 92% of the years when that happens, the market's up. Even though that's numerology, I'm just bringing it up because it went on. For the week, S&P barely budged. So again, despite all of the news, we've had 3 weeks in a row of not moving. Barely down, barely down, barely up. In terms of the S&P 1500 level 2 GICS, best performing group year to date, energy. I'm going to keep pounding on energy. Number 2, capital goods. Number 3, materials. If this doesn't scream the physical upgrade that we've been talking about, nothing will. On the bottom, software. By far the worst performing sector, down 12% year to date. IWM down 2.3%. It outperformed for the month, but gave a little bit back in the last week. Q's barely bunched for the week. Mag 7 up slightly after earnings. Here's gold. Here's silver. Look at these days. Nothing over the past 5 years that's even comparable. Multiple standard deviation fall, collapsing in these, and then you look month to date. Another great month for silver up here, and gold had its best month in the last 15 years. Even with the collapses on Friday. Don't get caught into the narratives of all these things. 10-year rates, again, as people trying to chase all over the place in 10-year rates, again, it's going to be a frustrating trade. The dollar, big week down, a little bit of a bounce when Kevin Warsh was announced as the Fed, but regardless, the dollar, big move. New lows. Trump exacerbated the situation by saying he's not concerned with the decline of the dollar. The Fed held rates. And again, as you go through this and you think about why, I just want to keep reinforcing, if we don't get bad news leading into a payroll number on the labor side, then they won't do anything. This is literally becoming ridiculous that we are talking about humanoids in the same week and autonomous vehicles and autonomous trucks, and we're literally talking about whether the possible that the economy is strong while we're laying off people, or at least not hiring people. But Amazon announces they're laying off 16,000 people due to AI. UPS to cut up to 30,000 jobs in closed facilities. Oracle may lay off 20 to 30,000. These are all this week. Home Depot. Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. What signs of stabilization do you see in the jobs market? She's a perma bear, so I'm not really caring about that. I'm just showing the fact that the labor market is not well. And here's the Atlanta Fed wage growth tracker. Big leap down. That is overlaid with the ECI year over year. So again, wages are coming down, productivity is going higher, profit margins are moving higher. And the fact that we have this happening and the Fed is not sure what to do makes sense. Consumer confidence hit a 12-year low this week. Stocks hit an all-time high on the same day. All right, PMI's going higher. Andreas Steno Larsen, with all the regional PMIs out, I'd highlight manufacturers doing exactly what we expect. You're getting the bounce. If this comes in where he has it, it'll be the highest level since 22. We just had a big Chicago number today. I think it's happening. So again, abundance and scarcity. You want to focus this entire year in investing in whatever is scarce. You can go look at the charts. You can go try to pick them. But if it's scarce, you can go. Software will remain in the abundance. If you want to go try and pick the abundance side, have fun. I go through in this piece why AI is running even into silver. So for everyone thinking silver is purely precious metals, the critical mineral side, the raw industrial metal side, I want to make sure that people realize that the amount of metals needed for AI is insane. In particular, in the silver side, it's in every single component. I wanted to make sure that this was not a precious metal story. Again, I showed this chart last week. It doesn't include the close from today, but you've got the same parabolic nature in memory as you do silver. So when people want to say that this is trading like a commodity, this is trading like scarcity, parabolas. If you guys want to hear some podcasts to listen to over the weekend on critical minerals, Macro Voices with Craig Tyndale, good one. Smarter Markets with Robert Friedland and Jeff Curry, great one. Go listen to that. In terms of the critical minerals, again, Trump can't speak about them more enough. He's doing deals with them. Everything is focused on it. He had an announcement on this. I think this in particular, in terms of backtracking on price floors, is going to start to be more of a story around the globe. Now, I wanted to highlight this chart in terms of the raw industrial metals. So the CRB RIN, the CRB raw industrials metals, which has a high correlation to countries that are in the metals game, in the minerals game over time. I created a copper and silver because they're one of or two of the components. This one ends up being 3/4 copper and 1/4 silver to normalize it to some degree with the volatility of silver. So this is the chart over the course of the last 24 years into July. And I picked July because July is when I wrote, the end of July is when I wrote the piece on PMIs going higher and believing that this would kick in the coming months. And now that we're starting to see it as we get into the new year, you've had a huge move in DRAM prices, and now you've taken this chart, and this is the copper silver. You're going to have a pullback in this back towards 0.5. But the reality is, for anyone looking, unless you don't believe the copper silver story, which is needed for electricity and the fact that we have supply shocks, are we going to go straight up in a line? Absolutely not. We did, as I showed before, we had a huge month in silver, again for the 5th month in a row. But you got to pay attention to the story that the raw industrial metals, aluminum, all these, there's going to be switching that happens because when those metals go up, the ones that can be switched are going to go to other places. This is the overlay of that chart with EWZ, Brazil. I can't emphasize it enough. I've talked about it. I think it fits in so many things for this year, so much so that this week for 22V, I will have a paper come out on Brazil and the green computer arbitrage of the AI decade. And it goes through a variety of different things. Brazil finishes up the month. Again, this isn't completely updated. It was down about a little over 1%, but you're still talking about the biggest rise since 2020. Silver, with the price going higher, this is how it's going to trigger into the energy market. So silver is a major part of solar. And just to give you an idea, this chart here shows the black component here is silver's percent of solar panel costs. So it went from 3% in 2019. This was it into this year now with prices up, and this was using price of around $90-something. So again, you're talking about a rise in this where it's going to make it harder for solar to be a build out. Silver squeeze leaves solar panel makers feeling the heat. Solar is for power. We need power. Go listen to this podcast. Rick Rule went through and he talked about the fact that it's time for oil and gas stocks, which we're seeing. But I think the rationale was we're in the parts of a boom now of exactly what we said. So again, just highlighting, this is before the close on Friday. This is actually through Thursday. These numbers have come down. But the main point is, again, you are getting massive moves in materials and energy for investors, for mutual funds, for everyone who's looking at it. You have to be involved. Chevron versus Salesforce.com. I've highlighted this trade since in this area in here. We've seen breakout. This is not updated through all of Friday. I will give you the monthly performance. If you were smart enough to put this trade on and follow my lead, you're up 45% this month. I did have some people that thanked me at the event in Miami who had put this on by buying calls on Chevron and puts on Salesforce.com. Again, I've shown XLE over IGV. It doesn't really matter to me, and this is the chart. We're at the very beginning stages of this, guys. This is going to continue to go higher, in my opinion. Software is in the early stages of a re-rating. Power is in an early stage, and I do think you're going to see energy prices move higher at a time when everyone is bearish on them. SMH versus IGV, again, this has been my favorite trade. Semis, I've now moved into energy as more as one that is less invested in. I'd rather be in the energy trade for this year than SMH, although XSD or any of the package things that I did, which are more the analog names, I do think those names can double this year. But when you're dealing with NVIDIA and Broadcom in particular, I think those have already had a good run, as has Intel. I think you're still going to have rises in this because we don't have enough chips. But again, I think you look to energy at this point. OpenAI on Friday. Fourth quarter IPO plan to race to beat Anthropic to the market. And I've said this before, I think OpenAI is just a cancer right now for any of the hyperscalers. They are forcing so many other issues, doing deals. Everyone's trying to front run each other. They're doing deals with any place where scarcity is going to kick in. And I think that ends up to a race to the bottom. I think it hurts in terms of the cloud ability because of the data center side. The models are moving extremely fast regardless because of the efficiency side. But I think OpenAI, I think XAI, I think Anthropic, all of these fourth quarter or all of these IPOs that are coming to the market along with SpaceX, you're talking about trillions of dollars. For growth companies out there, or the growth bucket, you're going to be saturated with deals, and I think OpenAI is just going to continue to hurt things. And I want to remind people, back in June of 2007, Blackstone, heavily into credit, heavily into the real estate market, basically came to the market just before the great financial crisis. This tends to happen over time in terms of IPOs or deals coming out around the time of peak. I don't think this is a peak in the market, but I do think for growth, I do think for anything related to AI and software and code, I'd be very, very wary that OpenAI, that XAI, that Anthropic, that all of these deals coming out have an eerie similar feeling to what happened when Blackstone went in, especially when you combine it with the fact that they got the curse of being this at the end of last year on December 29th. So I'm going to stick with my side that you want to be long commodities, you want to be long industrials, you want to be long this stuff. I just want to highlight, this came out this week. I saw this in X, and I just wanted to take you through basically taking these dots and kind of bringing it together and getting ideas. Again, I'll be doing these demos for people, but when you take and you see something like that and you put it into ChatGPT or Gemini and you ask to explain it and what it means, and you look for ideas and it shows you high bandwidth memory, Certus, PAM, optical, you get these stories and you start realizing, okay, we've got memory pressure. How big is the scarcity issue? One major manufacturer saying all of its NAND flash production for 2026 is already sold out. How the AI build-out is pushing up electronics prices. This will be a story as we go. Samsung raises NAND prices by 100%. Supply can't keep up with demand. And again, I remind you, nobody wanted to be long memory in the summer of last year. Now, Elon Musk is saying the memory needs on the earnings call. Frame memory as a long-term key bottleneck for Tesla's AI ambitions, and said Tesla may need to build its own large semiconductor fab that includes advanced memory. If you're not going to trust me, at least trust Elon. He said when he looks 3 to 4 years out, the main limiting factor in Tesla's growth is chip production. Do you really want to be long software when everyone is talking about the fact that we don't have enough chips, that AI demand is insatiable? Jensen Huang is talking about $85 trillion of a build-out, and to have that build-out work, it's all going to be in AI factories and on the edge, which means we need as much chips as we can. The story is not over yet. Memory's had a big run. I'm sure best case scenario over the next year, 2 years, best case scenario, I can't imagine Micron more than doubling. I can imagine battery names more than doubling. I can imagine many of these smaller semi names going up, but we've taken these things up to big levels. But until we start seeing something where we catch up on the earnings front, you're going to keep getting the movements that you got. So SK Hynix reported 66% year-over-year increase and 137% increase in operating profit. HBM revenue more than doubled year on year. We're still in the early stages, believe it or not, of memory in terms of the story. SanDisk Didn't close up as much as it was here pre-market on Friday, but I think it's just more the earnings per share beat by almost 100% on this. The guidance, 13 versus 421. When in history have you seen those types of numbers? So I took that chart. I said I want to expand past that. What are the other verticals that will benefit from this chart? I put it into Nano Banana, and this is what you get. Advanced compute, power infrastructure, metals, and minerals. To be able to build this, which is what is happening, we actually need those things. You'll come back in 3 years and you'll be there. ASML, I've talked about this one. Again, it's been a good time to be long these names. Apple shares surge on 16% on staggering iPhone demand. I mentioned how much better the iPhone is. I'm grateful for having got this when I did, because the cost of everything is about to go higher because of memory. Significant increase in memory prices make smartphones more expensive. If you haven't purchased your high-end computer, this Mac I bought in the last 2 months, the phone I bought in the last 2 months, go get them before the prices go up significantly, because they're going to go up significantly. Get ready. Computers in 2027 will be triple the price they are now. As Claude gets more popular, tokens get more expensive, and open source models become more powerful, there will be an obscene consumer rush to buy higher hardware. I won't read all of it, but let's just say you want to be long the things associated with it. This week's video for the week is Demis Hassabis and Dario Modi. This was actually last week, but I didn't see it till this week. I thought it was worthwhile to show this week because they got into a lot of different topics, but also these are the two nicest people in the AI world. These are the ones that I think are the most honest. They're the ones that will tell you the negatives along with the positives. But this interview, they went back and they talked about a lot of different things that are important. Hassabis remains cautious on, let's say, the creativity for science side, which is his definition of AGI. So he's still talking, 5 years for true ASI, or where you're going to actually have science breakthroughs, meaning more than 5 years, while Dario Modi is a little bit more. They both talked about jobs, and they talked about the fact that there's going to be a medium-term issue. It just is, and I think their main point was governments are unprepared. You're going to start to see this. It's not just governments. Organizations are unprepared. I'll talk about that more as we kind of move forward. Demis Hassabis on the AI shift, 10 times bigger and faster than the Industrial Revolution. I mean, he's talking about massive GDP expansion on this. In a world where AI moves exponentially, what happens to the value of long-duration assets? I wanted to bring this up because I just can't get around. The same way I talked about tenure rates and the Fed thinking about things like today, if you're involved in long-duration assets, the amount of assumptions you're taking without the liquidity associated with it, I don't see how they have any value, personally. You can't predict 6 months out. That's how fast things are moving. I think everyone in the market needs to adjust to time. We've seen things with memory. We've seen things with silver. We've seen things with gold. I think long-duration assets, I really don't know how you can think more than 3 years out on anything. So I think these things are going to remain an issue. I think the money's going to look for liquid things. I think the volumes on the liquidity side are going to be there because I think people still have to manage money. I only bring that up because I see higher volatility in terms of the markets, and you're going to have to get comfortable because the things to invest in now are about scarcity. They can run up dramatically. They can fall back 50% in a short amount of time, as we saw with silver and gold. You're going to see this over and over again. You're not going to be able to be involved in these on any kind of a basis, and I don't think you're going to have time to get in. You're going to have to be buying on days. If you're not in, when things are crazy, you're going to have to be getting out during the parabolic side, but you run the risk of these things never coming back to you. I know multiple people in Micron, SanDisk that now are on board, but they can't buy them up here. The arrival of AGI, just to show how close it is, Google DeepMind announced that Shane Legg is the chief AGI scientist, the co-founder of DeepMind. Humanity needs to wake up. Dario Modi put out a new warning in an AI constitution. It's worth going through, and it's just highlighting the risks that are coming. And this gets back to Demis Hassabis said the same thing. Sam Altman also said the same thing, which I'll read in a second. Governments are not prepared, but this goes further. Because I have to answer constantly quantum risk for Bitcoin, and I sit there and say, are you kidding me? With everything going on, you're worried about quantum risk? And yet still, intelligent people keep coming my way. Hey, people, I want you to read this and just realize we are at the level now where AI agent swarms are going to be a story. Bitcoin is far, far, far more prepared for AI agent swarms than JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and any of the banks you want. We saw a run on a bank recently with SVB. What would happen if this happened with multiple agent swarms, or the money was taken out, and I'm sure it would end up in Bitcoin, at some point over the course of the next year? The more I listen to this, the more that they are screaming, we've already seen the danger that's happening. When these guys say we're going to reach the cybersecurity high level on our preparedness framework soon for OpenAI, we're getting there. It is very important the world adopts these tools quickly to make software more secure. There will be many very capable models in the world soon. This is starting to get out of control. These guys have to release this. They're spending the money. They're going to release things before the security on the other side is ready. So the system is going to be ahead of it. I would just be very wary and thinking about the fact that this quantum risk for Bitcoin, which is multiple years down the line. In fact, timelines also remain highly contested, with projections ranging from a few years to several decades. They're going to have preparedness because they're going to watch what happens with agent swarms on these old, archaic fiat systems. Mark my words, there will be an event with agent swarms that will happen in the banks. That will be something that goes on, whether it's a stock exchange, all of these things. We are getting to the point where billions of AI agents will be able to target things, and the defense is just not there. AI token consumption increased exponentially last year due to reasoning models. Now it's going to increase exponentially again with agentic workloads. The agentic world is about to explode, guys. Here's more of the agentic world. The future of personal AI assistants. So this is all Claudebot, which has gained most of the stories. That was an Apple Mac story place. The most important video you'll watch, Claudebot has taken X by storm for good reason. It's the greatest application of AI ever. Every week there's a new thing by Claude, guys. Every single week. Gavin Baker put this out just to show that the productivity boom is here already, and it's going to explode as AI agents come in. Revenue per employee up 75% for the top decile of AI software companies in 2025. Remember, this is with software going down. Probably doesn't slow down in 2026 given the December revolution in AI coding agents. Prism, accelerating science writing in collaboration with AI. This is just speeding up the process of the medical side, allowing scientists to go on, just continues to make it easier and easier for everyone to make breakthroughs. And here's one of them. Again, David Sinclair. I follow him there as part of my HRV Substack. I do a lot of things from his book. FDA greenlights life biosensors human clinical trial on a near total reset. A near total reset in longevity. First of its kind, freight-only driverless truck network hits commercial scale. This was on Wednesday. Get ready to see trucks driving down the road with no people in them at some point. Next 6 months are going to be really weird. I follow AI adoption pretty closely, and I've never seen such a yawning inside-outside gap. People in San Francisco are putting multi-agent Claude swarms in charge of their lives, consulting chatbots before every decision, wireheading. If you read through the rest of it, this is all, and this is Kevin Roos, who I believe is the New York Times technology writer. He's saying, at the same time, you're finding people that don't use it. I completely agree, as I do this for a living and I talk to people about it. Bill Gurley, the #1 way to protect your career from AI is to be the most aggressive user of AI in your field. I'll say it again and again on here, mainly because it's resonating. I did my first video for the webinar series. We will have the paywall going up in the next 2 weeks. They're just going through all the bugs at this point. I know that I say that every week. It is coming, guys. I know you're waiting. I know you've been patient. Your kids have to be ready for this. They have to be ready. They're the ones that have to be AI native. They have no choice. They're not being taught it in the school. Before they get there, they have to be using it all week long, and I'm going to show you. I thought the first video went well. This is kind of a summary on what it is. Repetition builds comfort. Comfort builds fluency. Fluency turns AI from a tool into a partner. AI is not an answer bot. Its real value comes from exploration. If you guys have gotten to like the way that I think about markets, the way that I think about going from an idea to something, that all has been exacerbated by AI. I always had that. I've been a curious person. I collect dots, as I call them, as I go along. For those of you who listen to my podcast, Green Marbles, I collect them all the time. I had one moment of integration that happened where all of a sudden the systems thinking side of my brain popped out and answered a question for me. I'll get to that at the end. Human creativity versus AI optimization. The only edge we have as people is right now on the context side and finding the ideas and being able to filter. Our creativity is what allows us, with the ability of having a polymath with us, find things. That is the game plan for everyone. And here's an example of it. There was a deal this week. Meta and Corning, I've recommended Corning before, a $6 billion multi-year deal between Meta and Corning. Optical fiber is the emerging physical bottleneck. So remember, memory is a bottleneck. I've talked about Corning. I've talked about it and referenced it. So it's up a good amount since then. We're not even in the big phase of Corning. This is before the glass build out. This is before the needs of the autos, the needs of the phones, the needs of the computers, which is coming. They're talking about a shortage in optical fiber. Why? The scaling east-west traffic. That goes back to the thing I showed you earlier with the Steve Jobs side in it. So let's go back to how do you take something like that happens and immediately go, hey, there's a news article. Give me, and I run my skill on this, and then I go in and do my deep research. So I did that. I ran this while I was on a plane flying from Miami to LA. It runs this whole thing and ends up giving me a 5-page thing. Visor Labs, the fiber ingredient. It goes through everything in there, creates all the details. It gives me a 5-page thing with a bottom line. This deal is less about Corning-specific revenue uplift and more about institutional validation of the optical bottleneck thesis. The constraint migration from GPU power. Optical is now being priced into hyperscaler procurement behavior. This all gets into data movement, data traffic. Optical is a better way to go through it. So I take all of that stuff. It goes through my investment process, and what do I come out with? A list of about 15 to 20 names in this framework that I've shown over and over again. So for any of you who want it, the optical fiber bottleneck, there's a bunch of names in here that will benefit, all with the same thing. They've got a technical score from Johnny Roque. They've got a commentary score in terms of, are they already seeing the optical fiber side? Is it already showing up? And is it already progressing over the last 3 earnings reports? And again, are revisions heading higher in a strong way? Are they going? All of that's going. Here is Claude. So I basically took, I don't know, 2 minutes. I put the ad in, I launched it, and then I went in here and I asked it to do something on Microsoft for me. So can you go through the recent Microsoft earnings report and put together a model on how their financial model has changed due to rising RPOs? If data centers are bottlenecked and they keep spending at current rate, when will this become an issue? So it goes through, finds all the estimates, puts this in based on everything it gets from both the earnings commentary, and then it comes through and it says this. Now, only thing I did was this. That's all I did. I hit it. It spent about 3 to 5 minutes going through. It gave me a Excel file with all of this stuff in it with numbers that I can go check with the street. I can do whatever I want. But if you wanted to ask a question, have it modeled out, and then go bring it back and look at your own analysts and have them go through it. It's saying, if things don't change and we go at this run rate of RPOs and this CapEx, and that's the thing I want, how do you get this number to go faster if the RPOs are going? And the reality is you want to see what's going to happen. So I did that. You can do it on your own. HRV, thanks to everyone who's been going through it. I made the best new Substack list, number 5, on the HRV thing. I've really enjoyed talking back and forth with people who have got it. All right, Bitcoin, still asleep, doesn't want to move. Given what went on this week, it was actually a pretty quiet week. Given how much silver and gold were down, didn't follow silver and gold on the way up. Kind of went through its little gyrations. The chart is still horrible. Until we get a change in it, it is in the list of, hey, we need this thing to go for the short term. So from a trading perspective, it's very hard to buy something like this other than stick your toes in and stop yourself out. It has not acted well at all. I wrote this paper, the Substack. I highly recommend everyone read it. It goes for the silver side, it goes for the micron side, it goes for everything. It was clear that there was parabolic envy. This is all at the event I was at. I just want to remind people, silver didn't move for 14 years, and then when it finally did, it went parabolic. Micron didn't move for a long time, it went parabolic. Corning didn't move for a long time, 15 years, and then it went parabolic. I'm just telling you, this is the world we're in. When things turn, they're going to go quickly. The sausage squeeze of how many names on the software side are not going to participate. I do not believe that the Mag 7 can get you the alpha that is necessary. I think there's a lot of headwinds for them. Part of them is the RPO, part of them is the IPO that are coming, part of them is just the amount of debt these guys are now taking. I want to be long energy, I want to be long materials, but when you go through things, I still believe Bitcoin will be part of this equation once we get through it. One more thing to finish up. I have never mentioned NFTs. I have never brought it in. So when I mentioned a moment of integration, I do want to highlight that between conversations I've had with very respected people in the NFT side, but also something Demis Hassabis has said last week on AI Purpose, I finally have a place to where I understand where NFTs will be an important thing. This is not a digital art thing. This is not a Beeple thing. This is not a cyberpunk thing. This is not Pudgy Penguins. None of the things that you guys probably remember from 2122. But I will say, as part of the utility function for what is happening in crypto, stablecoins, real-world asset tokenization, along with NFTs, is a big deal. I think you should read this report. I had a fun time writing it. I had a fun time coordinating with some very, very smart people in the space. But a lot of these issues have come up, and I look forward to spending more time talking about it in the future. That's it for this week. I look forward to being back and doing it from Brooklyn next week. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Okay, we just wrapped Agent Swarms, OpenAI virus, and the parabolic age of volatility. So we're jumping back in. And we're trying to get a sense of, okay, well, what to watch next? GeoGuessr World Lead APAC. Where are we going? The settling the seed oil debate. Oh my goodness, seed oils. A sign of overshoot. Remember, we are in overshoot. A major population correction is inevitable because we used the fossil substrate to enact a breakout. I was born into apartheid. Israeli society has become completely genocidal. Human rights leader Yuli Novak. Still scrolling. Plasma-based life forms? Could creatures of fire and lightning exist? Ooh. Nate shot heated at LA Thieves collapse. Octet versus Paris finale. Martin Sheen, early years. China's only overseas military base is suddenly in danger and not for oil. Why Trump actually wants Greenland. Encryption versus hashing. What's the real difference? Molt book has arrived. Your body on ibuprofen. The West is going backwards. The good, bad, and orange. AI-powered biohub. Zuck's quest to cure all disease. Never-ending slop. The anti-union slop industry is wild. Black History Edition live. The stories they burned and buried. Breaking news: Dems flip R+20 deep red Texas as MAGA collapses. Okay, interesting. Orientalism. We have to add Orientalism. Chapter 1 at part 14. Planning your escape. Yeah, from microaggressions. Epstein's last interview with Steve Bannon. Yeah, why not? I don't know how they got the footage though, but that's legit. Ask members, is there a funding for adults going back to school? Arc Raiders Cinema. Member ask how to get on one-to-one helping. Whoa, the dark tidal waves. Oh, that's delicious. Shout out to Objective Personality, really coming out strong with their content marketing operation recently. Deep State University, Final Days of Life, Black Americans Need to Heal. Scott Aronson, what is quantum computing? French tin macro explorations. Yes, we're gonna do that. The character who guided Daniel Jackson through Ascension. Oma Desala and the Weight of Meridian clip. Dial the Gate. Democrat actually has some backbone. Jensen Huang floundering in AI fraud. Nvidia $100 billion investment failing. The pyramids were machines. Jeffrey Drummond. So we're continuously looking for our next entry, trying to find something to include. Iran readies for big war. Zelensky dithers, postpones talks, predicts failures. Russia restart strikes. Teaching famous creationist Will Duffy evolutionary theory. National emergency declared. Trump signs executive order addressing threats from Cuba and enemies. Okay, jumping in, scrolling. Gold and silver topping, stocks stay strong, mapping Bitcoin's next macro bottom. Scrolling. Excuse me. Pluralia Dialogos. Ruptures in the world order. What's next? Black economic beef. Nicki Minaj versus Derek Hamilton and some other madness. I mix what I like. So we still have not found that video that we're willing to put on. Jay-Z, Pusha T. The hidden economic war goes public at Davos. Epstein Files. The cult is back. Kevin Blanche. Prisker. Alex Preddy's Gestapo killers identified. Intricate art ice carving. Yeah, that is intricate. That takes super skill, dude. Crazy. Yeah, it must be easier, but geez, what was that like to create that when people first started making ice sculptures? I guess the intricacy is what makes it easier. Optic Texas versus Paris Gentlemates, elite mansions and castles of the reset. Is TSMC killing AI? Silicon Valley thinks TSMC is breaking the AI boom. Donald Trump and the dollar, either weakening, it works or it doesn't. These videos should not exist. Copernicus, okay, we'll double back and add some stuff for the scientific revolution. Becoming a citizen, Hyperworld Academy, dementia or just stupidity? Oh my goodness, that's how you know we're in a gerontocracy. Trump Epstein Files hearing, gotta add that. Scrolling, Return of the Shapeshifters. Professor Hamamoto. Anti-imperialism in the Sahel. Let's click on that.
Live stream.
You're live.
Great. Okay, folks, thanks. Hello, everybody. Thanks all for coming. We are about to get started. So, yeah, thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Thank you. So, thanks. Oh, sorry. Thanks all for coming. We are about to get started. Okay. Sorry about that technical problem. And now? Okay. Third time lucky. Hello everyone and welcome to another International Manifesto Group webinar co-organized with a critical theory workshop on the subject of anti-imperialism in the Sahel, and we are of course focused in particular on the Alliance of Sahel States. My name is Latika Desai. I'm the convener of the International Manifesto Group and I will be moderating this event. Let me just start off with a few reflections and before going to our speakers. The third decade of the 20th century has witnessed a phenomenon that has taken most observers by surprise. We have witnessed a series of popular patriotic military coups concentrated in Francophone Africa, which seem determined to challenge French and Western power. In 2023, faced with Western and French opposition and sanctions, three of the most powerful of these new governments cut ties with France and the West, forced the armed forces of the West and France to leave their countries, withdrew from the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS for short, and formed the Alliance of Sahel States. The latter is a comprehensive military, economic, and political alliance to strengthen their economic and military capacities to resist Western intervention in the region and to pursue autonomous development that is aimed at popular well-being. Perhaps inevitably, given the configuration of power in the world today, they have also been forming ever ever closer links with Russia and China, while, as is widely reported in parts of the alternative media, Ukraine has entered the West African region on the side of France and the West. If these developments have surprised most of the world, it is less because they are surprising in themselves, as I wager our distinguished panel will tell us in no uncertain terms, than because the rest of the world has, as usual, not been paying much attention to Africa. In addition to the neglect of Africa, people are surprised because anti-imperialist forces in the post-war period have tended to focus on the power and practices of the United States, while France's imperialism, particularly in Africa, flies under the radar. French political and military intervention in its former African colonies and its imposition of the colonial CFR currency on them in order to ensure that their resources, including critical ones like oil and uranium, are available cheaply to France. And these, of course, have been, these two things, the French intervention and the CFR, have, of course, been clearly major factors behind the coups. There is an additional factor, which is that there is a jihadist threat that all these countries have been facing following the West's deposition of Colonel Gaddafi of Libya and the transformation of Libya into a festering den of jihadism, and that which has, of course, been threatening much of West Africa for the past decade and a half. Needless to say, Western intelligence agencies have long been cultivating these groups in the region in much the same way as they have done in Syria, Libya, Iran, Mozambique, and elsewhere, with the aim of undermining states that assert and protect their sovereignty against imperialism. The countries of the Alliance of Sahel states have chalked up at least one major military success. They have been successful in preventing Western-backed ECOWAS intervention in Niger. It also seems that their economic management has not only been popular but also effective in promoting growth, at least so far. Meanwhile, their nationalization agenda and vocal opposition to imperialism are attracting support throughout the continent and indeed throughout the world. Of course, many of us have been wryly noting how Ibrahim Traore has become something of a Che Guevara-like cult figure in our own time. So how are we to understand these developments? What has been the structure of French imperialism in the region? How has it supported France and its relative autonomy and of course, strength and military, economic and other types of strength within the Western Alliance and NATO? Why is French imperialism facing this formidable challenge now? What is the social nature of these patriotic coups? What is the social base on which they rest? What is their economic strategy? What challenges do their projects of popular and autonomous development face? How have they dealt with Western and French extractive multinationals? What roles are China and Russia playing? How is the Alliance of Sahel states positioned in the fast-changing geopolitical economy of our time? This is what our distinguished panel is here to tell us. And I'm sure we are all eagerly awaiting what they have to say. So we are going to start off with Ndongo Sambasila. Ndongo is a development economist, and I should say roving developmental economist, because depending on what time of year it is or whatever, he's based in Dakar or in various European locations and elsewhere. But I do know, and I've known Ndongo for a very long time, he's very immersed in understanding the politics and political economy of the region. So all the speakers will speak for about 12 to 15 minutes, and then we will open up for questions and answers. So Ndongo, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Parika. I'm really pleased to be here among all of you. Thank you very much for this invitation. I will try to articulate my talk around this idea that what is happening in the Sahel is, and generally speaking in Francophone Africa, is a kind of democratic backsliding. This has been a major headline, in the past years. Many analysts, many mainstream media were portraying what is happening in the Sahel as a retreat, from democracy. And I would like to argue that what is happening in the Sahel is a new wave of true decolonization, of true liberation. Because most countries in Francophone Africa are still not independent, and they have to conquer that independence. And that is what has been going on in the Sahel. And to understand that, we have to go back from, let's say, the post-World War II. Because what happened at that period was that France was a relatively junior imperialist power, no leverage. No military leverage compared, let's say, to the United States or the Soviet bloc. It was not an industrial power like, let's say, Germany or Japan would become. It was not a financial power like, for example, the UK with the city, etc. So France had only his own asset was the empire. And that was de Gaulle's bet. De Gaulle said, if France has to exist and has to have its so-called strategic autonomy, France has to leverage its own empire, that means the former colonies, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. And there were two things that were key to de Gaulle. The first is to have what it is called in French the force de frappe, meaning that having the nuclear dissuasion power. And at the time, most of the, uranium sources were controlled, let's say, by the US, UK on one side, and also by the Soviet Union. And if France wanted to have this so-called force de frappe, France has to secure uranium supplies in Africa. And that's why France did its best to have control over Gabon, because Gabon was really uranium-rich just before Niger. And France also had good relationships with apartheid South Africa, because Namibia had, uranium sources to some extent. And after it was Niger, just before the independences. And so it was really important for France to become a nuclear power. And France achieved that through its own colonies. The other thing was that France was a weak junior power, and also wanted to have some leverage in a world dominated financially by the US dollar. And so for France, the economy of which was devastated after World War II, the issue was how to become competitive again, because the economy was devastated, and how to have access to the resources of the colonies in its own currency, not in US dollar, and how to make up for the needed, foreign exchange that France needed for its reconstruction. And that's why after World War II, 26 December 1945, they created the CFA franc. So the CFA franc is still existing, shared by 14 countries, 12 of them are former French colonies. But it allowed France at the time, and until the arrival of the dollar, a kind of exorbitant privilege. We are talking about the exorbitant privilege of the dollar, and France has a kind of localized exorbitant privilege within the CFA franc countries. That means France could buy on credit all of the goods and services coming from its own empire. And the other thing was that all of these countries, generally the empire, used to have trade surpluses with the rest of the world. That means that these countries were accumulating US dollars. And those US dollars were restituted to France in exchange of French francs, which were really a weaker currency, which had been devalued 10 times between 1948 and 1986. So that means that France could buy on credit, its imports from the franc zone, and also could use the foreign exchange, accumulated by these countries for its own economic development. That was what the CFA franc allowed France. And that's why at the time of independence, France never wanted to concede independence. It was forced to do so because at one point you have the Indochina War, you have also the Algerian War, and also there were many movements of liberations in Africa, and France did not want to have another war that it could not sustain. That's why France anticipated that and created what was called the community, meaning that you will remain within the empire but without independence. That was the deal. But in 1958, when de Gaulle came back and they had this new constitution, the fifth constitution, the current constitution of France, all of the colonies of the empire in Africa said, we don't want independence except for Sékou Touré. But when Sékou Touré said in 1958, we have to conquer our independence, this was the beginning of the end, let's say, of the former French empire. So in 1960, all of the other countries would gain their independence. But this was an independence without sovereignty because France told the new leadership there, if you want to have independence, you have to sign a number of agreements. And all of these agreements are variable. It was called cooperation agreements. And so France, the deal was, you will have your independence, but no sovereignty, for example, on your natural resources, or your education system, over your currency, in metals trade, etc. For example, if countries like Gabon, etc., wanted to sell their uranium, their strategic resources elsewhere, they had to first have authorization from France. And all of this was signed legally. So that means that at the time of independence in 1960, except for Sékou Touré in Guinea, who was a trade unionist, so he has a different background, and Sylvanus Olympio in Togo, for most of the others, the elites, they were chosen by France, by French leadership. So these were more or less, loyal subjects to the French. So this is a story, with my colleague Fanny Pigeot, we document it, we call it a story of electoral imperialism. But since the French Revolution, there have been, elections in the former French colonies. And France has always used its imperial right to choose who should rule, these former colonies and territories under its domination. To say that from the time of independence, 1960, most of the people in power, except for those two, Sékou Touré and Sylvanus Olympio, they were loyal to the French. And when you look at that story from 1960 to now, you would see that, in fact, there had never been a regular election which helped elect someone opposed to the system of French imperialism, we call it France-Afrique. There have never been. The only exception was March 2024 in Senegal. That was the first time for 16 countries that you had a regular election that helped elect people who were at least opposed to France-Afrique. Before, we never had that. We had people who were loyal to France-Afrique, and generally they came through rigged elections, or they just stayed in power. And the only time you had anti-imperialist leaders in power was people from the military. I'm not saying that the military are progressive by nature, but the only time you had anti-imperialist progressive leaders in power, in fact, they came through military coups. That was the case of in the Republic of Congo in the mid-1970s with Mayangwabi. He was the communist. He was killed. That was also the case of Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, 1987. He was killed. In Madagascar also, you had a very short reign of another military, also communist, also killed in power. So those were the only instances where you had anti-imperialist leaders coming to power. But that means that through normal elections, you could never have, anti-imperialist leaders committed, to national sovereignty, internationalism, and so on. And so that, but the situation changed from the 2020s in the Sahel. It's the first time that you have three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, creating an alliance against French imperialism. This is something really unique in the history of the former French colonies. So you have three anti-imperialist leaders uniting to say that we want to end French imperialism. So what is happening in the Sahel is a move towards true decolonization. And as Radhika said, these countries removed French troops and French military bases, and they did the same with the US. And also they have started to accept more control over their resources, natural resources. For example, if you take the case of uranium, there is some scholarly literature there, and you could see that the French used even to declare the uranium of Gabon as their own, uranium, not for Gabon, but as their own. And this country did not used to have good prices on the uranium. The former Chinese ambassador in Niamey, Niger, used to joke that it's very strange that after more than 40 years, Niger collects less export income from uranium compared to onions. And this was not a joke, and you could see that in the actual data, official data published, for example, by the central bank. For many years, Niger received more from onion exports than from its own uranium. So these countries have started to nationalize part of their resources and to claim, better deals, better mining deals. For example, Mali has done that, for example, for the gold sector. But the other thing to say that is that these coups are not a move towards, what is called democratic backsliding, because all of these coups, they have a history. The 16 countries that were formerly in the French France zone, or that currently belongs to the French France zone, that using the CFA. These 16 countries are the world champions of military coups. Since 1960 to 2023, there have been, at the world level, 375 successful military coups. That means that led to the overthrow of the current government. And 70 happened in those countries, the 16. And you could compare that with the rest of Africa, it was 160. But coups are not something pathological, because when nations grow, young nations, sometimes they will go through a period of instability. And you could see, for example, in Latin America, when they had independence in the 19th century, they had many military coups. But for most African countries, after the end of the Cold War, there were no longer any military coups for most of the African countries. The same coups happened in the same countries. And since NATO, the UK, the US, the France, they destroyed Libya, there have been 90 coups since between 2011 and 2023. And 15 out of the 19, they happened in North Africa and in the Sahel. So that means that the NATO destruction of Libya has destabilized this zone and had lasting consequences amid, neoliberal policies, followed by a government that were were under, Western domination. They were portrayed as democracies, but they did not create the type of economic performance, expected by the people. That's why when this military coup happened, all of them were really popular, and they are still popular. And you could see, for example, there had been an opinion survey by the German Social Democrat Foundation called the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. It's a kind of annual surveys covering, most of the biggest cities in Mali. And that survey concludes that, the regime in Mali is very, very popular, very, very popular. You could see it. Generally, the opinion rate is more than 80%. Often it's 90% on many questions. So often you will see in the media that these countries are not democratic, they are not popular, etc. But this is a caricature. But when you ask the people, they trust their government, and they see that this is really their government is leading them towards liberation from French neocolonialism and Western domination generally. And you could see that through independent opinion surveys. Afrobarometer also, when you read some of their surveys on Burkina Faso, you would find the same conclusions. But because these are anti-imperialist coups, they face very harsh sanctions. There had been coups in Gabon, coups in Guinea, but they did not face sanctions. Why? Because these coups, did not change the system at all. It was a kind of, starting anew the system of France-Africa, French domination. That's why they were not, they did not have sanctions against these countries. But in the case of Mali, Niger, and Burkina, you had very harsh sanctions. And some sanctions, they put it, on behalf of the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, which, gathers the 15 countries of West Africa. But some of these sanctions are not from ECOWAS. They are from France, clearly. Why? Because in January 2022, when there had been this new coup by Assimi Goïta, they said that the ECOWAS would sanction Mali. And part of the sanctions was that they would freeze all their assets in what they say the central banks and other financial institutions of West Africa. But you see, there is this concept of monetary sovereignty. When you have your own currency, no one could ask your central bank to deprive you access from your own bank accounts and do your regular payments as a government. But in the case of the CFA franc, these countries, they do not have their own central bank. They have a common central bank. And this common central bank is legally under the control of the French treasury. When I say legally, because they are agreements, legal agreement. And so the Malian government could no longer have access to its own accounts at the central bank. The banks in Mali could no longer have access to refinancing from the central bank. They could no longer have access to their own reserves, so they could no longer make any payments, and they had to default on their debt. This could only happen when you don't have your own currency. Because when they make these sanctions, Guinea also, there was a coup in Guinea, but Guinea has its own currency, so they could not implement the same sanctions in Guinea because Guinea has its own currency. So these sanctions were clearly neocolonial, and they were implemented under the aegis of France. And recently, there has been a court ruling saying that these sanctions were totally illegal because they have no legal basis. And at the time, I have written with my colleague Fanny Pichot to say that they have no legal basis to these sanctions. These are neocolonial sanctions. And these neocolonial sanctions applied only to coups which were not, liked by the West and especially by France. And now France and the US, they are very powerful, in ECOWAS. That's why these three countries, Mali, Burkina, and Niger, they said, we are going to exit from ECOWAS because this is an organization that has been captured by imperial powers, so we could no longer, work with you. That's the situation. Because it's because there are some people saying, oh, this is a move against Pan-Africanism. It's not a move against Pan-Africanism. The three IS countries, they are trying to show a new path for Pan-Africanism. A Pan-Africanism premised on liberation from all form, of external relation. So that is really what is happening in the Sahel. And I would say that what is happening, these type of coups are not a retreat, from democracy. It's a move forward, in terms of liberation. So I think the perspective should not be democracy in a bourgeois liberal sense, but liberation. There are many contradictions within this process of liberation. Maybe during the discussions we could talk about it. For example, they are still advised by neoliberals, and they have very, conservative, macroeconomic policies. But still, they have taken really important steps towards their own liberation. So I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ndongo. That was really a very excellent way to start us off, laying the background so beautifully. Our next speaker is Rob Lemkin. Rob Lemkin is I would say, a really important anti-imperialist documentary maker who has made documentaries for BBC, Channel 4, ITV, particularly about Africa, but also about other topics, including a celebrated one about Cambodia. So, Rob, please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Radhika. And I'm hoping that Carlos can release me so I can show my pictures. And I think the pictures now showing. Yes, hopefully they are now showing.
Yes, they are.
I feel, thank you. I'm very honoured to be in this panel and a bit humbled, to be honest, because I follow and read a lot of the people on this panel and learn a lot from them. And I by contrast, am not so sort of well informed on the overall, but I can maybe speak a little bit about the film and the work that I have been doing in Niger since 2015. And you have a headline, you've got a picture up there on the screen called with images of African Apocalypse, which was the film that I made about the French colonial invasion of Niger in 1899, which was made as a BBC film, but then was remade. And the image on the left of the screen is when it was remade in Hausa, which is one of the principal languages in Niger, and re-released there. And it's still on release in West Africa in that version in Hausa in French. The film has become, I suppose, not just, and I should say that I'm working on another film related to the same subject, but the film is not just a film in itself, because out of the process of making the film has come a case for reparations that has been formed by a group, which I'll just talk about in a minute or two, of people who were involved in making the film and doing the research. I'll go on to the next screen, which shows the map of, well, actually there's two maps there, but that's the map of Niger, that's from the Foreign Office, the British Foreign Office, and the map of Niger as of 2015, when I went to Niger for the first time, and we've worked there from then until the present day, showed that there's a yellow area along the border between Niger and Nigeria, which is where the French colonial invasion passed through, and it was one of the most violent. Of course, all colonial invasions were very violent, but this one was particularly violent and intense, and involved the killing of tens of thousands of people and the destruction of huge numbers of livelihoods and areas. And it was essentially a contest between France and Britain over who would control the land between the River Niger, or Niger, and Lake Chad. And as we passed and as we did our research along the borders, I'm sort of passing my kind of mouse here along just to sort of show you the areas that we were working along. This was the path that the French had taken as they came through communities and destroyed everything that they found in their sight. And this was the same route is now the kind of the national highway, Route Nationale 1. So it's La Une, it's the main highway of the country, and it's exactly the same route that the French Imperial mission went through. So as we went through, we met communities that had very deep memories of this 1899 period. Of course, nobody in 2015 or today was alive back in 1899, but the collective memory was extremely vivid and extremely intense, and one might say the transgenerational trauma was kind of was continuing. Partly, I think, really focused on this event because, in a sense, it was in this period in 1899, the first 6 months of 1899, when this military expedition took place, that really these parts of Niger, which were the most populated parts, were integrated into the French colonial system, and then were, as a result, became utterly impoverished, utterly de-developed or underdeveloped, or whatever you might want to say, and life went backwards for the entire population here, and continued going backwards. And Dongo has already mentioned uranium, and certainly for us and the people that I was working with, the Nigerian people, the communities that we work with, the uranium issue and the continued exploitation of uranium from Niger by French parastatals, originally Arewa, or maybe another company originally, but by now it's called, or more recently before the coup, it was called Orano, and that's still in place, although it's now been, that company has been removed in terms of its operations from Niger, but that's a contested removal, and there are legal kind of actions. The mining company is suing the Nigerian government for breach of contract, etc., etc. But this feeling that that uranium was being taken from Niger and that Nigerians were getting nothing from it, and that France, of course, France's electricity grid has relied very heavily in the past, and even until quite recently, on Nigerian uranium. But it's also important to note that the entire of France's military nuclear program relies totally on, or has relied totally on, Nigerian uranium up until the coup of July 2023. So that's the entire military uranium is sourced for the French program is sourced from Niger, but less than 10% or around 10% of rural Niger is electrified. So you have this huge kind of contrast, and people are, as understandably, completely angry about that. So as a result of the film that we made and the work that we did, the communities got together, and this is a slide from a hearing that was held. This was about the third hearing that was held. The first hearing was held online in New York with the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, who was inquiring into colonial violence and colonial crimes. And time went on. Lawyers were appointed in London, Doughty Street barristers representing a woman called Jelia Sane, who is a British Senegalese lawyer, and later on another lawyer called Jennifer Robinson, who is well known, or has been well known as the lawyer for the barrister for Julian Assange. They have taken on the case, and they represent this group, which is in English the Niger Communities Group on Reparatory Justice for Colonialism, and they have brought what they call a complaint to the United Nations and to the through the Special Rapporteur for the Promotion of Truth and Justice. It's quite a slow process, but eventually the final documents were submitted in last year in 2025 in around April, and France replied, as also did Niger, to say that they were, and you can see here's the Guardian reporting in France, signals willingness to discuss reparations for colonial massacres in Niger, and in France the same story is reported with a certain amount of, maybe a little bit slightly more coolly, because the French government, while it was open to the possibility of discussing some form of reparation in relation to, for example, the restitution of artifacts and so on and so on, stolen heritage and so on and so forth, relatively safe, one might say, areas of negotiation and contest. It was certainly not interested in discussing the possibility of an apology or an acknowledgement or any kind of truth commission on not just what had happened in 1899, but what had happened between 1899 and 1960, which is when French formal colonial rule ended. So they weren't really prepared to go that much further. However, what happened as a result of that was that I think the community campaign began to get a kind of quite a lot more traction and confidence in Niger itself. So while the French had given this slightly sort of half-hearted response, which was sort of opening the door in some ways. Of course, it has to be said they were also only opening the door to what they would say was, rather than dealing with community action, they would only really deal with the state. And they then also went on to say that because the state is no longer in dialogue with us, because the state has expelled the military presence of France, it's expelled the mining presence of France, and it's expelled the diplomatic presence in France. Therefore, there's no dialogue between the French state and the Niger state. So in a way, France was kind of agreeing to have a dialogue on the basis of there not being any there only being possibility for that to happen. So meanwhile, in Niger, I think the confidence in the issue became greater. The group that you can see sort of in these images, the group or members of the group that was formed to make the claim kind of appeared on the main TV shows and put their arguments about why they wanted reparations and what they wanted reparations to achieve. And it should be important to say that this isn't really about money. Or of course, money would be a nice thing, but it wasn't. It's really about power, and it's really about the acknowledgement of wrong and the acknowledgement of what has been done with a view to restoring a new type of arrangement. In the right-hand corner, you have the Prime Minister of Niger, Ali Lamine Zain, who integrated into his speech at the General Assembly the issues of the case, and this kind of thing I think is now, as I say, sort of becoming more significant in terms of the politics and the force that's going on in relation to where the AES revolution, we might say, is going. And then in small ways, changes have been made in the sense that you can see down on the right-hand side, you have the Avenue Sarkin Koni. That Sarkin Koni means the king of Koni, and he was the person who resisted the French back in 1899. So a road has been named after him, and this person here is the current Sarkin or Sultan of Koni, and he's his great grandson. This is a kind of a part of a process, of course, a limited process, but it is part of a process that's going on. I think that as basically the Niger government sort of stays in power and sort of remains on this sort of remained strong. Of course, in the last few days, there have been very, very serious attacks against it, and those, for the time being, have been repelled. But there's been an Islamic an attack has been claimed by the Islamic State in the last day or so, and that was quite an intense attack at the capital in Niamey. But even at the BBC, and you have a reporter here called Paul Melly, who would tend to be sort of not in favour of the Niger government. He's having to sort of acknowledge the fact that actually Niger is playing quite a smart move here and working with the Russians, and the Russians to give them their due as well are reading the political lines quite well in Niger and seeing that the desire for decolonisation, as Dongo's talking about, is very, very deep and is not just sort of something that's kind of tokenistic or temporary. It's a very, very deep it's a very, very deep matter. What I wanted to sort of touch on a little bit in talking about now is just something that we've done as sort of following this film, and I'll come back to the case very briefly at the end in a minute. But I think at the same time as while we have these military governments that are coming in, there is a sort of beginning of a move to sort of look at the history of decolonization and decolonizing politics and anti-imperialist politics in Niger. There have been other articles, but I'm just kind of showing pictures here that are related to ones that I worked on with my colleague Sidi Bilan, who's a Nigerian professor based in London. And when one of these articles was published, in fact, the original article was published, the version of this article was published on the Friends of Socialist China website, Quiet Please, We're Decolonizing, which is the title in French, Silence on Décolonise, the title of the autobiography of Djibo Bakri, who was the anti-colonialist leader of in Niger in the 1950s, and actually was the prime minister of the country until he was overthrown when the French still controlled the country before independence. And his movement, Sawaba, which was a socialist movement and wanted genuine liberation, was forced underground at the time of the independence and was expelled. Largely, the people were dispersed from the country, and they attempted to make a kind of an invasion of the country and take control of it, but they were unable, and there was massive repression. A lot of people were rounded up and killed, and really everything in that regard was over in Niger for quite some time. I'm cutting here to this film and this book called Salayunya, which was a book and then a film made by one of the leaders of Sawaba, who had been put in prison and then wrote this novel. And this is a novel. It's coming back to the film that I made. This is a novel about a woman who called Queen Salayunya, who resisted the French back in 1899. So having failed to take power in the 1960s with Sawaba, he turned while in prison to writing novels, and he created this historical novel, which was really about the resistance of the Nigerians and against the French. Of course, it was ultimately a kind of a failed resistance, but in a way, maybe it wasn't a failed resistance because that same resistance is coming back now. It's coming back in a very, very strongly felt way, and is very much part of what's kind of going on there at the moment. The area where the sort of in the area, in the middle of the Sahel, you have in the AES countries, you've got three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and this sort of triangular area is an area where at the moment where it's very unstable, but there was something that happened, and one of the kind of the epicenters of that is a place called Terra, and there in about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe longer, there was a certain amount of resistance to what the French were doing, because the French were still in place, and then there were a number of people that were killed there, and so it's an area where there's a lot of instability. There's a lot of what's described as jihadist insurgency, but historically it's an area where people have been quite resistant, and it's an area where, in this article, my colleague Femi Nylander and I were talking about the fact that it's a place where the Terra Declaration was made in the 1980s, and that's Thomas Sankara, and that's Kemi Seni Kouchi, who was the president of Niger at the time, and they made a very important statement about their declaration of non-alignment in the 1980s. Of course, as Radhika and Dongo have mentioned, Sankara was later killed. But this is all part of what's going on in Niger at the moment and where the contest is. There's some more stuff that sort of indicates the return to the story about colonial history, which of course is what I'm more involved with. And I really wanted to sort of talk about this for 1 minute or so, if that's left to me, which is just to say that the case goes on, and the lawyers are now going to the higher courts inside the United Nations and also in the African Court on Human Rights. But I think more importantly, it's the actual political organisation, the campaign group, and the campaigning within Niger and within the diaspora, and the organising that's going on around that. So in a way, there's a legal campaign, but there's also a political and sort of advocacy kind of campaign that's going on. And I think it's a process that's building kind of quite strongly, I think, and very excitingly. And this is my small snapshot of obviously a much larger process that's going on in Niger, with, as I say, huge contests going on, even as we speak, with violent attacks in Niamey airport just this week. But I would like to come back to Mamani, who I mentioned before was the leader of the socialist group, and quote from one of his poems, which some of you might be familiar with because it was quoted a certain amount at the time of the coup in 2023. And this is a poem, Espoir. It's in French. He wrote in French, but I read it to you in translation. And he's talking. I'll just read it. He says, "Come, my brothers, let us walk in the footsteps of freedom, from refusal to revolt, from revolt to revolution. Let us break the back of contempt. Let us shatter resignation." And I think that phrase, "let us shatter resignation," really does resound at the moment amongst the communities and the sort of political organisers and the activists in Niger. And that's what I'm kind of proud to be a very small part of. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was absolutely wonderful. Of course, looking at those amazing pictures always helps. And of course, you're speaking from your personal experience and commitment was very inspiring. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Miriam Kane. Miriam is the founder of the Black Liberation Alliance, a relatively new organization, but a very interesting one that is committed, that is a revolutionary collective of colonized peoples from the global south, which works on the principles of anti-racism and anti-imperialism. And they also do a lot of work, including, of course, make podcasts. So, Miriam, please go ahead. The floor is yours. Miriam, can you get on? Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, thanks very much, Veronica. Amazing. For having the Black Liberation Alliance to join you guys today. Yeah. I'm actually Uncle. I don't know.
Miriam, do you want to? I mean, I know you probably
have written an amazing.
Sorry to interrupt, Miriam, but we can barely hear you. Maybe don't even try to show the photo. Yeah. Maybe just, yeah, that's it. Maybe just try the voice. Sorry about this, but I think that given Miriam's connection, it might be the best solution.
Is that better?
Go ahead, and just please start again because we really couldn't hear you.
Wow. Are you guys able to hear me better?
Just about. You're still breaking up a bit.
Okay, let me with my phone maybe.
Maybe if you can try and fix it, and Miriam, if you send me your WhatsApp, I'll pass it on to Paul and see if he can WhatsApp you and you can sort it out at all. But one way or the other, we'll come back to you. You can go because I think we only have. Let me just double check. But we only have sorry, 1 second. Yes, so maybe we can come back to you after Gabriel. Do you think that might be a good idea?
Yes, I don't.
So yeah, yes. So maybe just direct message me your number and I'll pass it along to Paul, or direct message it directly to Paul. Either way, Paul Graham. Okay, so while Miriam hopefully will fix her problems, can I just introduce the speaker that would have gone after her, but we'll go now, and that's Gabriel Rockhill. Gabriel, of course, is probably known to many of you. He's been on our podcast before. He's the founding director of the Critical Theory Workshop, author of the recent Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism, and many other very penetrating works besides. And Gabriel, although he normally works on very high theoretical issues, has been paying a lot of attention to the Sahel and was, and of course, his Critical Theory Workshop has co-organized this webinar with us. So, Gabriel, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Radhika, and thank you to all of the other organizers and speakers. It's an honor to be here, and I'm glad that we're platforming this. I know, Radhika, the planning for this goes back almost not quite a year, and so it's nice to see it come together, and I hope there'll be more both intellectual and political work on this important region. So the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, has changed the landscape of West African politics to such an extent that it raises essential questions for the global anti-imperialist struggle. With the emergent multipolar world and the rise of the global south, and especially the east, it appears that there is now space being open for alternative developmental projects outside of the imperialist-dominated world. Only a few years ago, when French imperialism was much stronger, as well as the imperial court in general, the objective conditions made the emergence of such a project less likely. However, due to the continuing rise of China as a global powerhouse with all of its extensive international development projects, as well as the repositioning of Russia on the global stage as an oppositional force to the imperial core, not to mention all of the important ongoing global
to them and make sure they understand, because